My father was sick. I bought a ticket to visit him, but my mother-in-law tore it up and forced me to stay and cook New Year's Eve dinner. I didn't argue. I just did one thing in silence. On New Year's Day morning, my husband's family panicked. On New Year's Eve night, my husband's family joyfully celebrated the arrival of the new year. I was chained by the ankle with an iron chain in the corner of the kitchen. My cruel mother-in-law had torn the bus ticket that would take me to visit my agonizing father, but they had no idea that my silence that night would be the fuse that would burn this family's honor the next morning. In New York City, the days leading up to New Year's bring a damp, biting cold. The fine, persistent rain falling everywhere made the atmosphere even gloomier. Today was December 28th, and throughout the neighborhood, people were busy with last-minute shopping and cleaning to welcome the new year. This festive atmosphere seemed unable to penetrate my husband's imposing, yet cold, 3-story mansion. I was diligently cleaning a set of mahogany wooden furniture, carved with floral motifs, in the living room. When the cell phone in my coat pocket vibrated insistently, I picked it up and saw it was my younger brother, Mark, who lived in North Carolina. As soon as I answered, his voice sounded choked, stifled by tears. He told me that our dad had suffered a stroke and fallen unconscious in the yard while preparing firewood for roasting a hog. The family had already taken him to the county hospital in Raleigh, where he was in a deep coma. The doctor said the prognosis was very guarded. My world crashed around me. No. The cleaning cloth I held fell onto the cold tile floor. My ears buzzed, and my heart pounded so hard it felt like it wanted to burst from my chest. My dad, the man who worked tirelessly his whole life to raise us, who always advised me to be patient to maintain peace in my marriage, was now between life and death. I thought of nothing else. My daughterly instinct screamed that I had to return immediately to my father's bedside. I hastily put on a thin raincoat. I grabbed my old economy car and drove straight to the Port Authority bus terminal. On New Year's Eve, the terminal was overflowing with people. With much effort and pleading, I managed to buy a ticket for the last bus of the day, to Raleigh. With the ticket in hand, I clung to a thread of hope that I would arrive in time to see my father's face, to hold his calloused hand before the worst happened. I rushed back home to pack a small bag. As soon as I entered, I was met by my mother-in-law, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, standing with her arms crossed in the middle of the living room, with a cutting look that swept over me from head to toe. Seeing me come out of the room with a small travel bag, she asked in a harsh voice, "Where do you think you're going at this hour? In such a hurry? The house is a mess. Tomorrow's dinner isn't even started, and you want to run away from work?" I tried to remain calm and, with a trembling voice, pleaded, "Mom, my dad in North Carolina suffered a severe stroke. He's in intensive care. The doctor says the situation is critical. I ask your permission to go see how he is. Most of the cleaning is done. As for dinner, I ask that you and my sisters-in-law help me this time." Mrs. Eleanor Sterling showed not the slightest bit of compassion. Her face hardened, and her eyebrows furrowed. She approached me and snatched the ticket from my hand. Before my incredulous gaze, she crumpled it, tore it into pieces, and threw them to the floor. "In this house, there's no rule that a daughter-in-law can leave on December 28th. If your father is sick, let your brother take care of him. You are a married daughter, water that no longer returns to the source. You don't have the right to want to go back now. Tomorrow is the 30th. Your husband's entire family is coming here for the New Year's Eve dinner. If you leave, who will prepare the turkey? Who will make the apple pies? Who will stay in the kitchen serving all these people? Do you think it will be me, an old woman, serving dozens of people alone?" I knelt on the floor, picking up the pieces of the torn ticket as tears streamed down my face. I cried and implored Mrs. Eleanor Sterling to have pity on my situation. My father might not survive that night, but she didn't care. She turned her back on me coldly, leaving behind a cutting phrase, "It's best you stay home and fulfill your duty as a daughter-in-law. If you set foot outside this house, never show your face here again." Unable to dissuade my mother-in-law, I gathered my last strength and ran to the second floor, where David, my husband, was lying in bed, fiddling with his phone. Deep down, I still harbored a small hope that the man who had sworn eternal love to me, who had lived with me for 5 years, would understand my pain. I burst into the room, grabbed his arm, my face bathed in tears. David, my dad is very ill. My brother just called to say he's in a coma at the hospital. Please, talk to your mother so I can catch the bus to my hometown right now. My dad may not live much longer. Please. Let me go see his face one last time. David slowly lowered his phone. His gaze contained not a drop of compassion or concern. He frowned and pushed my hand away with an abrupt, irritated gesture. What is this scene? Crying and making all this noise? You bring bad luck to the house in these last days of the year. Mom is right. If you leave now, it's a disgrace to this family. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Your aunts, your cousins, the whole family is coming for dinner. You are the wife of the eldest son. If you are not present, they will say, I don't know how to raise my wife. If your father is sick, let the doctors take care of him. Your going won't cure him. David's cruel words were like knives, piercing my already wounded heart. I couldn't believe this was the man I called my husband. I wiped my tears and, with my voice choked with indignation, said, How can you say such a thing? He's my father, the man who gave me life. When your father was sick in the hospital, I spent weeks taking care of him without complaining. Now that my father is on the verge of death, you, for the sake of your family's reputation, forbid me from fulfilling my duty as a daughter. Hearing my protest, David became furious. He raised his hand and slapped me so hard, I fell onto the bed. My cheek burned, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the cruelty I felt in my soul. You are very brave. Now you even dare to talk back to me. Let me tell you one thing. You got married, you have to follow this family's customs. Your family matters come later. When the 3 days of celebration are over, on the 3rd, I'll take you there. For now, go to the kitchen to check on things for tomorrow's dinner. Don't drive me crazy. I looked at David with deep despair. All the faith, all the love and respect I had dedicated to him over 5 years had shattered into 1,000 pieces. This house, this family, had never considered me a person. They saw me only as an unpaid tool, a servant to maintain the facade of a respectable family. I stumbled out of the room. With a dead heart, I no longer felt pain. I no longer cried, only a terrifying emptiness and cold. The night advanced, and the rain outside grew more intense. The huge house was plunged into silence. Only the whistling of the wind in the window cracks could be heard. Lying on a thin mattress on the kitchen floor, I couldn't get a wink of sleep. The image of my elderly, fragile father in a hospital bed, connected to tubes, haunted me. I knew I couldn't stay there a second longer. I waited until everyone was deeply asleep. I got up in silence, with only the clothes I was wearing. I put on slippers and planned to walk to the main road to catch a taxi to the highway, where I would try to catch a passing bus. But I was wrong. This family's cruelty went far beyond my imagination. When my hand touched the handle of the kitchen door, leading to the patio, a strong hand grabbed my hair and pulled me back. David appeared from the darkness, smelling strongly of alcohol. He gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Where do you think you're going? I knew you'd never be able to obey. Do you want to embarrass this house? Do you want me to look bad in front of the family? Don't you? Today, I'm going to teach you a lesson, so you learn your place. David dragged me across the cold tile floor, ignoring my screams and pleas to let me go. He took me to the darkest corner of the kitchen, where a solid wooden dining table stood. From the corner, he pulled out a thick iron chain, the kind used to lock a street gate, and a brass padlock, the size of a fist. A bad premonition invaded me. I panicked and struggled to escape, but the strength of a small woman was no match for a furious man. David threw me to the floor, his knee pressing hard on my back, causing sharp pain. His rough hands wrapped the cold, rusty chain around my right ankle. 1 turn, 2 turns, and then he passed the other end of the chain through the leg of the wooden table. The sound of the padlock closing echoed dryly, cutting off my last hope of freedom. After finishing, David stood up, wiping his hands as if he had just thrown out the trash. He looked at me, huddled on the floor, and uttered the cruelest words a husband can say to his wife. Stay there, and think about what you did. The chain is long enough for you to go from the sink to the stove. Tomorrow, you'd better cook. When the 3 days of celebration are over and the guests are gone, I'll open the padlock. For now, be a good kitchen watchdog for this family." David's silhouette disappeared behind the closed door, leaving me alone in the cold, mold-smelling kitchen. The iron chain weighed on my ankle, transmitting a cold that chilled my bones. In despair, I pulled the chain with both hands, trying to loosen it, but the padlock remained motionless. My ankle began to turn red and sore from the friction with the rough links. On the dark night before the new year, I was chained by my own husband like an animal, deprived of my most basic right to be human. After a night of terror, my tears seemed to have dried. I sat with my head against the table leg, my gaze empty, fixed on the chain that held me, at the height of humiliation and pain. A cold, sharp thought crossed my mind. I couldn't continue to cry, to be weak, and to let them trample on me. My submission over 5 years had earned me a cruel prison sentence. I had to save myself, to show them the price to pay for trampling on a person's dignity. I remembered my old cell phone that I used to listen to music while cooking, still inside the apron pocket, hanging on a hook. With the limited reach of the chain, I stretched as far as I could and, luckily, managed to reach the apron. The cell phone still had more than half its battery. I quickly hid it in the bottom of my flannel pants pocket. I put it on absolute silent mode. The day began to dawn. Dense fog covered the kitchen window. Footsteps were heard descending the stairs. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling entered the kitchen, followed by my 2 sisters-in-law, Sarah and Chloe. They saw me chained to the table leg, but neither showed surprise or compassion. On the contrary, a sneering smile hovered on their lips. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling approached, arms crossed, and began to utter her usual poisonous words. Discreetly, I put my hand in my pocket and activated the audio recording on my cell phone. "You're awake, you ill-mannered, stubborn daughter-in-law. Do you think this family will starve without you? You were born into a family of impoverished peasants. Marrying my son was the luck of your life. And instead of being grateful, you still try to run away to your parents' house on New Year's Eve. David chaining you was even lenient. Today you'd better cook the entire dinner. If one dish is missing, I'll shave your head." The 2 sisters-in-law joined in with an equally biting tone. Sarah said with an air of contempt, "She really is ungrateful. Mother-in-law giving her good advice, and she still talks back. You're the younger daughter-in-law. You have to know how to shoulder your responsibilities. Don't be lazy." Chloe added, "A woman who, before finishing her husband's household chores, is already thinking about her own family's problems, deserves this. Let it serve as a lesson for that stubbornness." I kept my head down without responding. My silence made Mrs. Eleanor Sterling think I was completely subjugated. She let out a scoff of disdain, telling her daughters-in-law to go have tea, leaving all the heavy kitchen work to me. When their footsteps receded, I slowly took out my phone. The 5-minute recording had clearly captured all the offensive, humiliating, and cruel words of that family. Then, I turned on the camera and pointed it directly at my right ankle, where the iron chain tightened, the skin torn, with traces of dried blood on the tile floor. I carefully saved each clear, detailed photograph in a hidden folder on my phone. These proofs would be my sharpest weapon to regain my freedom and my justice. It was only 5 a.m., and the late December cold was still biting. In the small kitchen, with a suffocating smell of grease and mold, I began my slave labor, under the yoke of the iron chain. The stove lit up, heat radiated, but it wasn't enough to warm my frozen heart. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling had demanded a traditionally lavish New Year's Eve feast with a dozen dishes, a colossal task for a chained woman. I had to drag the chain noisily across the floor, every time I moved from the sink to the stove and back to the counter. With each step, the chain rubbed against the open wound on my ankle, making me wince in pain, but I gritted my teeth without uttering a single moan. The first task was to prepare the roast ham. I prepared the vegetables, potatoes, eggs, with immense difficulty. The limited movement space forced me to stretch my arms and bend my body painfully. Splashes of boiling water hit my hands, leaving the skin red, but I quickly rinsed them with cold water and continued. Then came the roasted turkey. I had to season it, stuff it, and place it in the oven, constantly monitoring the temperature so the skin would be golden and crispy, exactly as my demanding mother-in-law liked. Next, chicken noodle soup. I washed the rice, cooked the chicken, shredded it, all with calculated movements so as not to trip over the chain. The aroma of the soup filled the kitchen, but I felt not the slightest appetite. In addition, I had to make 50 apple pies. I beat the eggs, passed the bread slices, fried them in hot oil, and finally coated them with sugar and cinnamon. My hands moved quickly, making each pie to perfection, aligning them on a tray. Then the creamy rice pudding, the chocolate cake decorated with sprinkles. The amount of work was overwhelming for my fragile shoulders. The kitchen felt like a sauna. Sweat soaked my back, mixing with the silent tears that rolled down my face as I thought of my father in the hospital. The sound of the chain clanking against the table leg, and the floor was like the ticking of a clock of destiny. I continued to work, channeling all my anger and rage into each cut of the knife, into each stir of the pot. I knew that my patience at that moment was not cowardice, but rather a waiting period for the right opportunity. The more I saw the lavish and sumptuous dinner taking shape under my wounded hands, the more I told myself to be strong. The darkness of that kitchen would not imprison me forever, and the price that family would pay for this dinner of sweat and tears would be very, very expensive. Everything was just beginning for a fateful New Year's Eve. In the living room, the sound of the television broadcasting a New Year's music program echoed into the cramped kitchen. On the velvet sofa, my two sisters-in-law, Sarah and Chloe, sat cross-legged, eating potato chips carelessly. The crumbs scattered across the coffee table and fell onto the rug. They laughed and chatted animatedly about the new clothes they had bought for the holidays and the boxes of fine chocolates their friends had given them. Their laughter contrasted violently with the suffocating atmosphere, the smell of smoke, and the deadly silence of the kitchen where I was trapped. I stirred the soup, the steam hitting my face, but I dared not stop. I knew that any carelessness, any flame too high that would make the pot overflow or burn, would bring me Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's wrath. As I skimmed the broth, I heard footsteps approaching. Sarah, dressed in a vibrant red dress, entered the kitchen with a plate of chips in her hand. Behind her came Chloe in a sequined dress. They stopped at the door, arms crossed. Looking at me with a mixture of scorn and contempt, Sarah said in a shrill, sarcastic voice, "Well, well, our little sister-in-law is so hard-working, isn't she? That iron chain really makes a difference. She's as obedient as a little dog. Other days, she's always complaining about work, dividing tasks. Today, she's making an entire dinner alone. See? Mom always said, straighten the cucumber when it's young. And a daughter-in-law, as soon as she arrives, if she isn't put in her place right away, she'll get out of hand." Chloe next to her didn't miss the opportunity to add, "She gets it now. This family has rules. It has tradition. It's not like her village, where you come and go as you please, in the middle of the festive season, with the whole family gathered, and she wants to leave." David chaining her was even lenient. It's a necessary lesson for a sassy daughter-in-law. Stay there and think about life, and do your duties if you want to be released. Hearing those malicious words tightened my heart, but I showed no emotion. I picked up a ladle and slowly basted the turkey in the oven with its own sauce. I didn't look at them. I didn't answer. The sound of the chain hitting the table leg every time I moved was the tragic soundtrack to the family play in which I was forced to be the villain. Seeing my silence, Sarah seemed irritated that she couldn't provoke me. She approached the sink and threw a handful of chip crumbs onto the floor I had just cleaned. With an arrogant gesture, she ordered, "After you finish cooking, remember to sweep this up. The house can't have trash on New Year's. It brings bad luck. And hurry up. Your aunts and cousins are almost here for dinner. If you're late, Mom won't forgive you." Having said that, they turned around and returned to the living room for their futile conversations. I looked at their backs, cold as ice. I told myself to endure. The physical pain of the chain was nothing compared to the anguish for my father. I had to survive these days, keep my head cool to deliver the final blow when the time came. My silence was not submission, but the calm before the storm that would sweep away this family's facade of morality. Despite my sisters-in-law's cruel words, I chose absolute silence. My face was impassive, like a stone statue in the dark corner of the kitchen. I focused entirely on cooking, my hands moving mechanically. I created an invisible barrier around me, preventing any insult or contempt from reaching me. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling came down and inspected my work. Seeing me cooking without a word of complaint, without a tear, she seemed surprised. Normally, I would cry or respond when unfairly accused. But today, I was silent. My silence seemed to create an invisible pressure, making the atmosphere even heavier. Standing at the kitchen door, hands on her hips, she tried to probe me. "Don't make that funeral face. Nobody owes you anything in this house for you to be so sullen on New Year's Eve. If you're going to cook, cook properly. Don't take your frustration out on the food. If any dish isn't good today, you can be sure you won't get away with it." I heard every threat, but my eyelids didn't tremble. I put down the knife, turned, and faced her. My gaze was not one of fear or submission, but of a terrifying emptiness. I looked directly into her eyes, as if my soul was piercing hers. Without saying a word, I went back to slicing the pepperoni for the appetizers. It was this terrifying silence that made her uncomfortable. She cleared her throat and left, muttering unintelligible curses. Sarah and Chloe in the living room also sensed my strangeness. They glanced sideways at the kitchen, whispering. They assumed I was desperate and defeated by the chain. They ignored me and continued eating fruit and watching television. Little did they know that beneath that apathetic appearance, a flame of fury burned in my chest. I counted every minute, every second. The cold chain cut into my inflamed skin, a bone-deep pain. But that pain kept me awake. Mentally, I planned how to unmask that family. Images of my father in the hospital, of David hitting and chaining me, of my mother-in-law tearing up the ticket, repeated in my mind, urging me to act. The silence of one who is cornered is preparation for the fiercest resistance. Exactly at 8 p.m., the sound of cars arriving broke the silence of the street, a sign that the relatives were starting to arrive. From the kitchen, I heard the noisy greetings, Mr. Arthur Sterling's voice, inviting aunts and cousins in. The clinking of plates, the scraping of chairs, mixed with the laughter of those preparing for a feast. I took the platters of food, one by one, to the dining room. 3 long tables were arranged in the center of the room, platters of steaming ham, golden turkey, trays of apple pies and chocolate cake, all the fruit of my sweat and tears during a day of forced labor. When the food was all on the table, the family gathered. Mr. Arthur Sterling raised his glass of wine, cleared his throat, and made a toast to the new year. Everyone stood up. The clinking of glasses echoed joyfully. "A happy new year. May it be a prosperous year." Laughter filled the house. No one cared about my absence from the table. Or perhaps they knew, but ignored it as if I didn't exist. I returned to the miserable kitchen, where the chain awaited me. The conversations from the living room bounced off the walls, creating a painful contrast with my situation. I sat on the cold floor. My dinner was a bowl of yesterday's cold rice, with a little ham broth and some leftover cabbage. I chewed the dry rice, salted by my tears. The humiliation was a knot in my throat. At that very moment, in Raleigh, my brother would be keeping vigil at the intensive care door, counting every breath of our father. Thinking of him made me bite my lip to keep from crying. I finished the rice, swallowing the bitterness and hatred. The more they mistreated me, the more I perceived the cruelty of those people. They toasted to good things, but were willing to trample on the dignity of a defenseless woman, to chain her like an animal. That dinner, for me, was a banquet of hypocrisy and cruelty. The party extended until late afternoon the next day. Relatives left, leaving behind a battlefield of dirty dishes. While Mrs. Eleanor Sterling and the 2 gorged sisters-in-law dozed on the sofa watching a comedy show, I had to drag the heavy chain and start cleaning mountains of dishes. I had planned everything. During dinner preparation, I decided they wouldn't peacefully enjoy the fruit of my labor. My revenge was silent, but calculated. I knew everyone's tastes. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling loved potato salad. Sarah and Chloe were addicted to pumpkin pie with whipped cream. Taking advantage of a moment when I was alone in the kitchen, I doctored their favorite dishes. In Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's potato salad, I added a generous amount of extra strong vinegar, ensuring the acidity was unbearable. In the whipped cream for my sister's-in-law's pumpkin pie, I added a spoonful of crushed chili pepper, hidden under the sweet appearance. The result was as expected. During dinner, when Mrs. Eleanor Sterling took the first forkful of potato salad, she made a face and convulsively winced at the vinegary taste. She grumbled that the supermarket vinegar must be adulterated. Sarah and Chloe, tasting the pumpkin pie, choked on the spiciness, their faces turning red. They drank water eagerly, complaining that the chili pepper must have been too strong. No one suspected me. They blamed the ingredients. From my corner in the kitchen, listening to their complaints and coughs, I felt a small satisfaction. It was a childish revenge, a test to see that they weren't as intelligent as they thought. They were just parasites, living off other people's efforts, easily fooled by their own arrogance. The real game was yet to come. When the midnight fireworks marked the first seconds of the new year, time dragged on. The sky outside was black. The cold winter night entered through the window cracks. The wall clock marked 11:45 p.m. The New Year's atmosphere spread through the neighborhood. The television in the living room, volume at maximum, broadcast the countdown. My in-laws, by affinity, prepared for the rituals. Mr. Arthur Sterling, in a suit, arranged the 12 grapes on the table. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling lit candles. David and his brothers smoked on the balcony waiting for the fireworks. I was huddled in the kitchen, my eyes wide open, my heart racing. My hand gripped the old cell phone hidden in my pocket. I knew my opportunity was coming. The chain held me to the table leg, but its length allowed me to reach, with effort, the kitchen door frame that opened into the living room. A detail David, in his negligence, hadn't calculated. The clock struck 11:55 p.m. The first fireworks began to sound in the distance. The television announced the countdown: 10, 9, 8, 7. Outside, the sky lit up. The whole family ran to the balcony and the street to watch the show. Shouts of joy and toasts muffled all other sounds. The house was empty and silent. I stretched the chain to its maximum. Each link cut into my wound, blood staining my pants, but I gritted my teeth. I dragged myself to the edge of the door, stretching my body towards the living room coffee table. Only an arm's length was missing. On the glass table, David's top-of-the-line cell phone lay next to a pack of cigarettes. In his haste to see the fireworks, he had forgotten it. As I had anticipated, he always had his phone at hand, but in moments of euphoria, he became careless. I extended my arm, my trembling fingers touching the cold metal surface. I made it. I quickly pulled the phone to me and cowered back into the darkness of the kitchen. The television light illuminated my tense face. The moment to unmask these devils had arrived. I took a deep breath, my thumb trembling on the screen, ready for a counterattack that would shake the entire family on New Year's Day morning. The sound of fireworks outside announced the turn of the year. My husband's family was all on the balcony and in the street. In the living room, only the intermittent light of the television. I held my breath, stretching the chain to its maximum. Each rusty link dug into my bleeding ankle, a searing pain, but I bit my lip, determined not to make a sound. I extended my arm, my trembling fingers touched David's phone. I made it. I pulled it to me. Retreating to the darkness of the kitchen, I turned on the screen. It asked for a password or fingerprint. David was lazy. He had previously added my fingerprint to his phone so I could answer client messages for him. Since our relationship had deteriorated, he had changed the numeric password, but had forgotten to delete my fingerprint. I placed my index finger on the sensor, a small click, and the phone unlocked. My heart pounded uncontrollably. I acted quickly. On my old phone, I activated proximity file sharing. In less than 10 seconds, the audio recording with my mother-in-law's insults and the photograph of my chained ankle were transferred to David's phone. Then, I opened the WhatsApp application. In the search bar, I typed Sterling Family Chat. It was the conversation group for my husband's entire family, with almost 50 members, where they liked to flaunt their wealth and false morality. I uploaded the audio file and the photograph to the conversation window. To ensure everyone would see, I wrote a short message, a New Year's gift from our family to our aunts and cousins. I pressed the send button without hesitation. The loading circle spun for a few seconds, and then the successfully sent symbol appeared. Immediately, I kept my finger on the sent message and selected the delete for me option. This way, the message would remain in the group for everyone to see. But on David's phone, all traces would have been impeccably erased. Finally, I deleted the file transfer history, turned off the screen, and dragged myself back to the door frame, carefully placing the phone back in its original place. Done with that, I retreated to my corner in the kitchen, leaned against the wall, and let out a long sigh. Cold sweat ran down my forehead. Outside, the fireworks continued, mixed with David's family's laughter and toasts. They had no idea that a time bomb had been activated, and that it would burn all the honor and reputation they had worked so hard to build. This New Year's Eve, I had no new clothes, no money in my pocket, no warm family dinner, but I had given myself an invaluable gift, a well-deserved revenge. On New Year's Day morning, the streets of New York City were immersed in a rare tranquility. The fine winter rain fell on the bare branches of the trees. Unlike the usual hustle and bustle, the first morning of the year brought a sense of solemnity. In my husband's family home, the smell of incense from the small altar mixed with the aroma of the king cake and roasted turkey, creating a festive atmosphere. They had woken up early, David, impeccably suited, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, in a velvet dress and pearl necklace, looking like a powerful matriarch. The sisters-in-law, in brightly colored dresses and heavy makeup, were all at the living room table, eating dinner leftovers, toasting with sparkling cider. I remained huddled in the cold kitchen. I had spent the night sleepless. My face was pale and drawn. No one remembered to give me a piece of bread or a glass of water. To them, I was an object forgotten in a corner. Mr. Arthur Sterling, my father-in-law, after lighting the candles, sat in his leather armchair, put on his glasses, and picked up his phone to send New Year's messages. The room was filled with laughter. Mr. Arthur opened WhatsApp. Seconds later, the smile vanished from his face. The hand holding the phone began to tremble. His face turned from rosy to pale, eyes wide with horror. He slid his finger across the screen, his breath coming in gasps. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's and her daughters-in-law's laughter silenced as they noticed his strange reaction. "What's wrong with you?" Mrs. Eleanor Sterling asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Mr. Arthur Sterling didn't answer. He raised his head, eyes bloodshot, and glared at David. The atmosphere in the room froze. The sound of the television seemed to have been swallowed by a frightening silence. From my dark corner, I sketched a cold smile. The storm I had predicted had finally arrived. The bomb of truth had exploded, tearing through the mask of hypocrisy of those people. Mr. Arthur Sterling jumped up and threw his phone onto the glass table with a crash. Rage made his chest heave. "David, David!" he shouted, his voice making the house tremble. "Take my phone, open the family group, and see the mess you've just made." David, startled, picked up the phone. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, Sarah, and Chloe huddled around him. As soon as he touched the audio file, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's shrill, arrogant voice echoed through the room. "You were born into a family of impoverished peasants. Marrying my son was the luck of your life. David chaining you was even lenient. If one dish is missing, I'll shave your head." To this was added the metallic sound of the chain dragging on the floor. And that wasn't all. On the screen was the photograph of my ankle. The chain dug into the torn skin, the dried blood on the tile. Below, dozens of shocked messages from relatives sent since the previous night. The eldest uncle, "Arthur, Eleanor, what kind of joke is this? It's the 21st century, and you chain your daughter-in-law like in the Middle Ages. Another uncle, what a disgrace of a family. Always boasting about your upbringing. And inside you treat a person this way. What did the girl do to deserve this?" The cousin. David sent this to the group at midnight. What does this mean? Is it a challenge or a confession of domestic violence? Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, hearing her own voice and reading the messages, felt her legs weaken and fell onto the sofa, pale as wax. Sarah's glass of sparkling cider fell from her hand and shattered on the floor. David was petrified, staring at the screen, stammering incoherent words. Mr. Arthur Sterling pointed at his wife and son, his voice choked with rage. Look what you've done. This family's mask has fallen. The honor I built my whole life has been stained by you. The entire family is insulting me. Do something. Call and apologize. Explain yourselves. If you don't, forget I'm your father. Panic set in. Minutes ago, they were arrogant people enjoying their luxury. Now, they were criminals, exposed in public. They grabbed their phones to call relatives, but no one answered. After the initial shock, chaos ensued. With mutual accusations, David, trembling, opened WhatsApp on his own phone. "Dad, it wasn't me. I swear I didn't send anything. There's no history on my phone. They must have hacked my account to hurt us." Mr. Arthur Sterling slammed his cane on the floor. "Shut up! If they had hacked your account, how would they have the recording of your mother's voice? How would they have the photograph of Anna chained in our kitchen? It was someone from this house. Who was it? Confess, before I lose my head." Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, pale, suddenly stood up and pointed at the daughters-in-law, Sarah and Chloe. "It was you, wasn't it? You've always been jealous of us. Last night you pretended to go to the bathroom, went down to the kitchen, took the photo, recorded my voice, and used David's phone. You wanted to destroy us." Sarah jumped up, offended. "Mom, you're kidding. We don't have time for such things. Don't blame us." David chained Anna. "You insulted her. The blame lies with those who are guilty. Don't put it on us." Chloe joined her. "It's true. Mom can't control her mouth, and David doesn't know how to be discreet. Now it's our fault? Maybe David himself, drunk, made a mistake and sent it to the group." "I'm not crazy enough to destroy my own reputation," David shouted. The phone was on the table. Someone used it. The shouts, the crying, the banging of doors and tables created a deafening cacophony. The people who claimed to be so united now, faced with shame, attacked each other mercilessly. Their true, selfish, and petty nature was exposed. In the middle of the argument, Mr. Arthur Sterling signaled for them to shut up. He thought for a moment and then walked quickly towards the kitchen. The others followed him, stopping at the door, glaring at me with angry looks. I remained sitting on the floor, my hair disheveled, my eyes tired, feigning to tremble. I raised my face and looked at them with an expression of innocence and fear. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling couldn't contain herself. She entered the kitchen and raised her hand to hit me. "You viper! You sent that garbage, didn't you? You wanted to destroy this family?" Mr. Arthur Sterling held her arm. "Calm down. Let me ask. Hitting her now won't solve anything." He turned to me. "Anna, tell me the truth. Did you take David's phone?" I blinked, letting some tears fall. With a weak but logical voice, I replied, "Father-in-law, that's a very unfair accusation. Look at me. I've been chained to this table leg since the day before yesterday. The length of the chain only allows me to go from the sink to the stove. Measure it. See if the chain reaches the living room table." I pointed to my old phone that Mrs. Eleanor Sterling herself had confiscated and kept on top of a cabinet. Besides, Mom took my phone so I couldn't call anyone. How could I, trapped in this dark corner, fly to the living room, unlock David's phone, record Mom's voice, and send everything, even if I had wings? My words, soft but forceful, hit their stupidity squarely. David stretched the chain. Indeed, the end only reached the door frame, more than 3 feet from the coffee table. They looked at each other, embarrassed. My logic was irrefutable. The evidence at the scene was convincing. They were at a dead end. "Mrs. Eleanor Sterling stammered, not knowing what to say. Sarah and Chloe looked away, afraid of being accused. They stood there, paralyzed by their own ignorance. I lowered my head to hide a smile of satisfaction. My play, the innocent victim, had been a resounding success, throwing them into a swamp of confusion, fear, and distrust. The moment for me to break the chains was near. Silence took over the kitchen. No one could refute my logic, but Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's stubborn nature would not allow her to admit defeat. When she realized she couldn't beat me with arguments, she resorted to violence. She let out a sharp scream, her eyes injected with fury, grabbed a broom from a corner, and advanced towards me, brandishing the handle, ready to hit me on the head, while shouting insults, and demanding that I confess. But today's Anna was not the same submissive daughter-in-law as always. When the broom handle came down, I raised my arms, grabbed it tightly, and with all my accumulated rage, ripped it from her hands and threw it away. She lost her balance, recoiling, her face pale with astonishment at my resistance. I put my hands on the floor and slowly stood up. The sound of the chain dragging was cold and metallic. I raised my head and looked her in the eyes. I pointed to my ankle, where the rusty iron links dug into the torn and bleeding skin. "Look closely at this," I said, my voice firm and clear. "This is proof of this family's crime. For 2 days, you and David held me here like an animal. You forced me to work tirelessly and prevented me from seeing my dying father. Do you think that because you have money and power, you can trample on the law and the dignity of others?" David, behind her, tried to save appearances. "Shut up, don't talk nonsense. I tied you up so you wouldn't run away during the holidays. To fulfill your duty as a daughter-in-law. Dirty laundry is washed at home. Don't threaten us with laws." I turned to him with a sneer. "How ignorant, David. How ignorant. You know that imprisoning a person, depriving them of their freedom, is a crime. It's called kidnapping. Not to mention the assaults and insults, which are domestic violence. The photographs and recordings that your aunts and cousins have on their phones are irrefutable evidence. If I file a police report right now, you'll go to jail and your mother will go to court. Do you think your family's money can save you from a sentence?" My words, loaded with legal terms, were like a bucket of cold water. Sarah and Chloe, at the door, turned pale. Trembling, they began to realize the gravity of the situation. The fear of being implicated, of the scandal in the neighborhood, took hold of them. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling was petrified, her teeth chattering. Her authority as a tyrannical mother-in-law crumbled before the resistance of someone pushed to their limit. That dark corner was no longer my prison. It was the courtroom where I exposed their crimes. The tension in the house was palpable. My threat to involve the law hit the weak point of that family, which so valued appearances. Mr. Arthur Sterling, the proud patriarch, was pale and sweating. He took a deep breath and pushed his wife and son away. With a completely different attitude, he approached me, trying to force a sympathetic air. He pulled a plastic stool and sat in front of me. "Anna, my dear, I know you have suffered greatly. David is impulsive. Your mother-in-law has a sharp tongue. On behalf of the whole family, I apologize. Arguments happen in all families. You must be patient and forgive to maintain peace." I crossed my arms, observing his performance coldly. He continued, thinking he had convinced me. "My decision is this. David will take off your chain. You can rest. Your sisters-in-law will take care of the rest of the holiday tasks. On the 3rd, when the guests are gone, David will drive you to Raleigh to visit your father. In return, you take David's phone and send a message to the family group saying that the recording and the photograph were just a New Year's prank. A silly internet challenge. Tell everyone not to take it personally. If you do that, we forget everything and go back to being a happy family." Hearing that ridiculous proposal, I couldn't help but let out a bitter, ironic laugh. I looked him in the eyes, shaking my head. "Father-in-law, you underestimate me. Do you think a few lies can erase the sound of these chains? Do you think the photograph of my bleeding ankle can be explained as a prank? No one in the family is that naive. You want to save this family's reputation by using my blood and my tears to patch up the holes. I tell you now, I accept no deal. The truth has come out, and this family will have to bear the consequences. There is no 3rd day, no forgetting. Everything has to be resolved this morning, on the 1st day of the year." My refusal made his mask of benevolence fall. His patience ran out. He slammed his hand on the table, his eyes glaring at me. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, seeing her husband angry, stepped forward and pointed her finger at me. "You insolent girl. We give you a hand, and you want the whole arm. You want to make a scandal? Then let's do it. Do you think we're afraid of your messages?" I did not falter. I took a step back and, with a firm voice, gave them my ultimatum. "It's good that you're not afraid. Then stand there and watch as I make sure this whole street knows who you are. I demand 3 things right now. If you don't comply, I'll grab a neighbor's phone and call 911. The family held its breath. I raised a finger. First, return my phone, my wallet, and my ID that Mom confiscated immediately. I raised the second finger. Second, David immediately transfers $10,000 to my account. Hearing the amount, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling jumped. Are you crazy? Are you trying to extort us? By what right do you demand that money? I looked her in the eyes, my voice heavy with a truth she had tried to bury. Don't pretend to forget. Whose $10,000 is that? 5 years ago, when I got married, my parents sold a piece of land they owned to give me that money as a startup fund. Mom, with sweet words, convinced me to lend it to remodel this house. She promised she would return it when we needed it. For 5 years, I worked here like a slave and never asked for a cent. Now my father is dying in the hospital. I need that money to pay his medical expenses to save his life. It's my parents' hard-earned money. I am demanding what is mine. I am not stealing from anyone. My words silenced Mrs. Eleanor Sterling. David and the sisters-in-law lowered their heads. They knew it was true. I raised the third finger, my voice cold. And finally, after the money is in my account, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling herself, with her own hands, will take the key and open this chain. It was Mom who tore up my ticket. It was Mom who ordered me to be held. It will be Mom who returns my freedom to me. I give you 5 minutes to think and act. After that, I will say no more. The law will resolve it. The 5 minutes passed in tense silence. Mr. Arthur Sterling closed his eyes. He knew they were cornered. The evidence of kidnapping and domestic violence could ruin his son's future and the family's honor. Compared to $10,000 and his wife's wounded pride, the price to pay for justice was too high. He opened his eyes and looked at David with fury. What are you standing there doing? Open the banking app and transfer the money to her. Give her back what's hers. Don't embarrass me anymore. David, trembling, picked up his phone. 2 minutes later, my old phone, now in Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's hands, chimed. I extended my hand. She, pale, handed me the phone and my documents. I confirmed the transfer. The money that could save my father was finally with me. I put everything in my pocket, took a step back, and pointed to the padlock on my ankle. I looked at Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, my voice like a judge's. The money is here. Now it's your turn to fulfill the last condition. Take the key and open the chain. For Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, that was the ultimate humiliation. She, the powerful woman, having to kneel to free the daughter-in-law she despised. Never, she whimpered. I'd rather die than humiliate myself in front of an insolent daughter-in-law like you. David, you open it. I crossed my arms. The condition was clear. Mom has to open it. If it's David, I'll call the police. Mr. Arthur Sterling grabbed his wife's arm and pulled her. You created this situation. You fix it. Do you want your son to go to jail? Do you want me to disown you? Then stand there. Otherwise, get down and open the damn padlock. Now, under her husband's pressure and the fear of the law, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling gave in, approaching me, her legs trembling. David handed her the small brass key. With trembling hands, she knelt on the dirty kitchen floor. Her head was bowed. When the key turned in the lock and the heavy chain fell to the floor with a thud, her pride shattered into 1,000 pieces. She burst into tears. Tears of bitterness, humiliation, and belated remorse. When the chain came off my ankle, I felt freedom flow through my body. The pain of the wound disappeared, giving way to immense relief. I said no more. The punishment of truth and public humiliation was enough. I turned my back and went up to my room. I packed a small bag. As I came down, the family was still in the living room. They looked at me with a mixture of hatred, fear, and shame. No one said a word. No one tried to stop me. I opened the door and left that hellish house. Outside, the New Year's sky was clear and blue. The surprisingly warm sun of the first day of the year chased away the winter cold. I took a deep breath of the fresh air. I called a taxi and went straight to the bus terminal. With a generous tip, I managed a ticket for a bus to Raleigh. Hours later, I was at the hospital. I paid in advance for my father's expenses. A miracle happened. He came out of the crisis, his vital signs stabilized, and he slowly opened his eyes and saw his daughter holding his hand. Tears of happiness rolled down our faces. The following months were a reckoning. I sent a divorce petition, already signed by me, to the court, along with evidence of violence. David, to avoid criminal prosecution, signed the divorce by mutual consent. Even so, he was fined for domestic violence and kidnapping, which stained his record and harmed his career. As for Mrs. Eleanor Sterling's family, their punishment was more lasting. The New Year's Eve scandal became an indelible stain. The family patriarch excluded them from family rituals for having dishonored the family name. They were no longer invited to weddings or baptisms. Neighbors looked at them with contempt, whispering about the cruel mother-in-law who enslaved her daughter-in-law. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, who loved to show off, began to live secluded in her house, leaving only in a mask, condemned to an old age of solitude and shame. And I, at 30, began a new life, a free, independent life, without visible or invisible chains. Submission was in the past, giving way to the strength of a woman who learned to fight for her life and her dignity.